Hi, everybody. It's Paul Rabinowitz back again. Today, I'm going to be bringing you a really special uh, athlete that we're going to be talking about as far as his importance, but also his genius. So, we're talking about Muhammad Ali. And I personally was a huge fan of Muhammad Ali when I was younger. Not just as a boxer, but as a person who spoke his mind, as a person who, for me, uh, really allowed me to understand what it meant not only to be an African American in this country, even though, of course, I am not, but to see it through his eyes, to see it through a poor person from Kentucky, born and raised Louisville, um, and then to really be able to come out into the world and with his brilliance of uh, the spoken word and his philosophy and how he saw not only his opponents but really the world around him is somewhat worthwhile exploring a little bit deeper. So I work from a book which I've used a couple times in our writing class called The World's Best Memoir Writing. And there's a series of really wonderful writers in this book, but not only writers, artists, politicians, athletes, you name it, they're in here. And what's so interesting about this book is that the memoirs are from different phases in their life. So some of the memoirs are written about childhood. So, for example, Winston Churchill writes about what it was like to grow up. Ingmar Bergman, what it was like on his first Christmas day to receive a camera. And then we have writers writing about their teenage years. And that's really interesting. Elie Wiesel, for example, being taken to a concentration camp in Auschwitz, what that was like. And that's really harrowing. But it's important for us to read and important for us to know what that was all about. And then we have like Charlie Chaplin writing about his years as a senior citizen in his late 70s and what that was like to live out in Switzerland with his wife at the time, uh, Uma, and how wonderful that world was for him. Muhammad Ali here is going to, in his autobiography, this is an excerpt taken from it, he's going to be writing about his meeting with Bertrand Russel. Now, Bertrand Russell was one of the most important mathematicians of the 20th century. He's British. He was involved in numerous projects, but he was also, as many scientists were, including Albert Einstein, opposed to war, pacifist. And what's fascinating about people like Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein is that they were conflicted during World War II. So World War I, when Bertrand Russell was really the world's leading pacifist, he and Albert Einstein were conflicted during World War II. Albert Einstein because he was Jewish, and he was a German Jew who had to escape first to Austria and then eventually to the United States. And the decimation of 6 million Jews of his counterparts that lived in Europe that weren't able to get out. And so even though he was a pacifist, he realized that building the bomb and the formula that would eventually go into the hydrogen and atom bomb that would be that would land on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Albert Einstein was conflicted because he knew that that technology is not going to stop. It's just going to keep growing, and the ability to destroy our globe and planet and the human race is not so far-fetched. Bertrand Russell was of the same ilk. He believed very strongly in sort of a pacifist approach to conflict. And of course, that came into problems in World War II. But he was also a great writer. and he won the Nobel Prize in literature. So he was a man of letters, and he was a man of numbers, no pun intended. He was a pacifist, and he was a thinker, and he was a philosopher. My dad loved Bertrand Russell. He loved to read about him. My dad was an engineer. He was the first microwave engineer in the United States. And he really embraced that idea of a mathematician, scientist, engineer, and philosopher. My dad loved Albert Einstein. My dad couldn't afford to go to Princeton, where Albert Einstein was teaching. He had to settle for City College and then Brooklyn Polytech. But RCA asked my dad to become the first microwave engineer, and so they basically put him through their master's program, and then he taught for many years to pay back the education, and then went out on his own. But the reason I bring all this up is that this particular story, beautiful story, is written about a person that Muhammad Ali had no clue who he was. So let's take you into this. It's a few pages long, goes quick. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the words of Muhammad Ali. I'm going to begin with a short sort of bio to bring us into the perspective of where we're going to start his actual words from, and then we'll read the actual words. So here's the beginning. The Greatest is my own story, written in 1975 by Muhammad Ali, American boxer and humanitarian. The Greatest was the result of 6 years' collaboration between the boxer and his co-writer, Richard Durham. In this autobiographical work, Ali describes, among other incidents, his gold medal at the 1960s Olympics, his conversion to Islam, leading to his name change from Cassius Clay, of course, to Muhammad Ali, and his 1967 refusal to be drafted into the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War, at which point he was taken to court and then stripped of his heavyweight title. After announcing his retirement in 1981, Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He remains active. When this was written, he was still alive. He remains active in advocating for children and war victims and in promoting humanitarian causes. In 2005, he published a further memoir co-written with one of his 9 children and called The Soul of the Butterfly, Reflections on Life's Journey. So I just want to mention that diagnosed with Parkinson's, but really probably brought on by atrophy in the brain from hundreds and thousands of punches that he took to the brain. So you're aware that he was stripped of his title and for 3 years couldn't box in his prime. So when he came back, he did not have the speed that he had before he was stripped and could no longer box. So he had to figure out another way to win, and the way he figured that out is somewhat brutal. He would allow his opponents to basically pummel him for round after round after round after round, take the punches. He learned to take these blows until in the 12th or the 15th round, when the opponent would start to tire from these constant blows, Ali would get his surge of energy and then, of course, defeat the boxer, who at that point was so exhausted that any punch to the head would bring him down. Now, that took a toll on Muhammad Ali, of course. And we know what he looked like later in his life, this amazing man, this articulate man who could no longer talk. Yeah, I guess it's Parkinson's, but it was probably brought about by atrophy from boxing. Here we go. Of all the poems I wrote, all the words I spoke, I shouted, I'm the greatest, I'm the prettiest, I can't be beat. He must fall in 5. Of all the controversies that aroused people against me or for me, None would have the effect on my life or change the climate around me like the poem I read on a TV hookup one warm February afternoon in Miami, 1966. I was in training and looking forward to my third defense of the world heavyweight title, this time against 6'6" Ernie the Octopus Terrell, so named because he wrapped his long arms like tentacles around his opponents, smothering their blows and hugging them half to death. I had come out into the front yard of a little gym. I came out into the front yard of the little gray cement cottage that my white Southern Christian millionaire sponsors had rented in my name in the black section of Miami. A TV reporter had been set up to ask my reaction to the fact that the Louisville Draft Board had just promoted me from IY deferred status to IA, making me eligible for immediate induction into the U.S. Army. I gave it the following. I got no quarrel with the Viet Cong. Later, when they kept asking the same question, I rhymed it for them. Keep asking me no matter how long on the war in Vietnam, I sing this song. I ain't got no quarrel with the Viet Cong. I said more than that, of course, much, much more. And all evening, but those were the only words it seemed the world wanted to hear from me. They broke out in headlines across America and overseas, in London, and Paris, and Berlin, and Zurich, Madrid, Hong Kong, Rome, Amsterdam. And for years afterwards, their echo would rumble in the air around me. In fact, the rumbling began even before I got to sleep that night. After the reporters left, I took a ride over to Miami Beach Steakhouse, where when I came back, my brother was in the doorway. He was beckoning me in a way I understood to mean he wanted no reporters to follow. The phones won't stop, he whispered as I brushed past him. They gone crazy. We had 3 phones and all 3 were ringing. I was reaching for the nearest one. Wait a minute, he tried to restrain me. Let me answer. They all insane. But I was already hearing a hard, mean voice on the other end of the line. This you, Cassius? No, sir, I said, feeling he should at least acknowledge my name. This is Muhammad Ali. Muhammad, Cassius, whatever you call yourself, I heard you on TV, he shouted. You cowardly turncoat black rat. If I had a bomb, I would blow you to hell. I've got a message for you and your kind. He hung up. Since I had already gotten the message and picked up the kitchen phone, a woman's voice was hysterical. She said, Cassius Clay, is that you? You better than my son? You black bastard, you, I pray to God they draft you tomorrow, draft you and shoot you on the spot. Listen to me. I let her go, picked up the phone in the bedroom. This time, it was a voice I knew. A deputy sheriff named Murphy, who had escorted me around Miami Beach many times. He had a soft drawl, like a fatherly bigot. Now, Cassius, you just done gone too far now. Something's telling you wrong. Them Jews and Dagos you got around you. Now, some of my boys want to come down and talk to you for your own good. I hung up and took the phone, handed to me by my sparring partner, Cody Jones. There was only heavy breathing. Ben, you gonna die, nigger, before the night's out. You gonna die for that. And more heavy breathing. Those who had always wanted me to disappear from the scene, they reacted quickest. The first calls came mostly from the white side of Miami. But as the news spread across the time zones, other voices were saying, that was mighty fine. I'm glad you said that. It's time someone spoke out. And in the days that followed, calls came in from Kansas City, Omaha, St. Louis, Las Vegas, New York, Philadelphia, housewives and professionals and plain everyday people who I never heard from except when I pulverized somebody in the ring, thanked me for what I said. It was a strange, new feeling. And now, without planning or even wanting it, I was an important part of a movement I hardly knew existed. For days, I was talking to people from a whole new world, people who were not even interested in sports, especially prize fighting. One in particular I will never forget, a remarkable man. 70 years older than me, but with a fresh outlook which seemed fairer than that of any white man I had ever met in America. My brother Rahman had handed me the phone saying, operator says a Mr. Bertrand Russel is calling Mr. Muhammad Ali. I took it and heard the crisp accent of an Englishman. Is this Muhammad Ali? When I said it was, he asked me if I had been quoted correctly. I acknowledged that I had been, but wondered out loud, why does everyone want to know what I think about Vietnam? I'm no politician. I'm no leader. I'm just an athlete. Well, he said, this is a war more barbaric than others. And because a mystique is built up around a champion fighter, I suppose the world had more than incidental curiosity about what the world champion thinks. Usually he goes with the tide, but you, my friend, surprised them. I liked the sound of his voice and told him I might be coming to England soon to fight the European champ Henry Cooper again. If I fight Henry Cooper, I said, who'd you bet on? He laughed. Henry's capable, but I think I'd pick you. I gave him back a stock answer I used on such occasions. You're not as dumb as you look. And I invited him to ringside when I got to London. He couldn't come to the fight, but for years we exchanged cards and notes. I had no idea who he was. The name Bertrand Russel had never come up in Central High in Louisville, Kentucky, until 2 years later, when I was thumbing through a World Book Encyclopedia in the Muhammad Speaks newspaper office in Chicago and saw his name and saw his picture. He was described as one of the greatest mathematicians and philosophers of the 20th century. That very minute, I sat down and typed out a letter of apology for my offhand remark. You're not as dumb as you look. And he wrote back that he had enjoyed the joke. A short time after I fought Cooper, when I had another fight prospect in London, I made plans for Belinda and me to visit him. But I had to explain to him that the outcome of my fight against being drafted to Vietnam might hold me up. The letter he wrote was sent to me in Houston, Texas. It read, I have read your letter with the greatest admiration and personal respect. In the coming months, there is no doubt that the men who rule Washington will try to damage you in every way open to them. But I am sure you know that you spoke for your people and for the oppressed everywhere in the courageous defiance of American power. They will try to break you because you are a symbol of a force they are unable to destroy, namely, the aroused consciousness of a whole people determined no longer to be butchered and debased with fear and oppression. You have my wholehearted support. Call me when you come to England. Yours sincerely, Bertrand Russel. By the time I got his letter, I had been convicted and my passport lifted, just as his had been in World War I. 4 years later, when my passport was finally returned, the friend I had made with my remark in my front yard had died. I thought of him whenever I visited England, and for years I kept a picture of his warm face and wide eyes, not as dumb as he looks. So that's the wonderful piece of history and autobiography by Muhammad Ali, his autobiography writing about his meeting with Bertrand, or I should say writing about his television interview in front of his house and his friendship with Bertrand Russell. So what's ironic about all this is that Muhammad Ali was respected for his wit, for his courage, for his stance. And even sometimes when the remark just flew out, like, I have no problem or no, I have no issue with the Viet Cong, he really was defying the American war. Now we know afterwards, after 1966, and this was early on, demonstrations raged by 68, 69, they were at their zenith. And Muhammad Ali could no longer fight because the American government took away his passport, took away his ability to work. So those were difficult times, and there was a time that Muhammad Ali, he himself, felt that he was sort of doomed to this in a certain way, that the American government had sort of figured that this was a way to sort of stop him or to shut him up. However, we do know that he came back. And we also know that when all was said and done, he fought many times after that, the classic fights with Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Leon Holmes. These classic fights that went on for the 15 rounds, if there were championships of 12 rounds. But what we do know the outcomes of those fights, but what we grappled with really was who this man was. And we know later in his life, after he truly retired from boxing, because he did come back a few times, although he should not have. Boxing becomes in your blood. It becomes a way of life. It becomes a living, a brutal living, a living that can take your life, not in a, not literally, but take your life as in your memory, your ability to talk, to cause bruising on your brain. However, and yet, Muhammad Ali, as a 12-year-old boy in Louisville, Kentucky, a racist South, had no other option. He had no choice. And here's Bertrand Russell, studied at the greatest university in the world, Oxford, really began to become the world's greatest mind, recognized the genius in Muhammad Ali. And I am convinced to this day, I am convinced that if Muhammad Ali had an opportunity, like I did, or like many of you, he would have been the president or a philosopher. He would have lived a long life, maybe as old as Bertrand Russel, and he would have wrote many great articles. But all that he could do, his only opportunity to get him out of Louisville, Kentucky, as a young African American, was to box. And he boxed with all of the beauty, he boxed with all of the poetry reserved for an artist or a philosopher. And I love the fact that Bertrand Russell recognized that in his simplistic comment about the Viet Cong, he had awoke a nation. He had shook the United States of America to the core because, love him or hate him, we follow our athletes. We admire our athletes. We love or hate our athletes. We pay attention. So what I would like to do for our next meeting is to have you jot down your own memoir about a time that you heard something. Maybe it was a simple proverb, or maybe it was your priest or rabbi or somebody at church saying something like, don't forget you were once a slave in Egypt. And if you can remember that, then we'll all be great human beings, because we will never forget the core of existence, that if somebody suffers, we have to understand that suffering. Or maybe it was your mom or your dad who said something simple, like, you won't understand him until you walk a mile in his shoes. And at 6 or 7, you didn't get that. What did that mean? But later on, you understood that to understand somebody, you have to be in his shoes. So like Muhammad Ali, who said, I've got no qualms with the Viet Cong. That simple saying resonated with me. I didn't get it at 7 years old. I didn't get it. And I asked my dad, and he said, well, son, we'll talk later. But he did talk to me. And he did say a couple days later that what Muhammad Ali was saying is he was speaking for the nation. Nobody, or I should say 95% of the nation, did not want to go to war. But either it was what they had to do because America was calling them, and they were the sons and daughters, possibly, of World War II vets. So that's my little story of Muhammad Ali and that wonderful relationship that he forged with Bertrand Russell. I truly love that. And I just want to quote one last time, because I don't want to get the wordings right. He says, I ain't got no quarrel with the Viet Cong. So why should I go and fight them? He said, my quarrel is with racist America. My quarrel was the fact that I had to sit at a different counter, that my mom was berated time and time again in front of me. And that's what I've got a problem with. But I ain't got no quarrel with the Viet Cong. Thank you very much. Before we go, as I always do, I am going to put up on our screen, you'll have to give me just a half a second, my phone number, in case you'd like to call. If you write something, I'm always willing to listen by phone to your pieces. I can make some comments, or just knowing that there's a person out there that you can share your work with. is extremely important for all writers. So that's something that I want to offer to everybody here. And I'm going to put that right here if I can find it. Here it is. So I'm just going to mention that my phone number is up here. I'm going to make it a little bit larger so you can all see it fairly easily. And it says, if you want to share your work with me, call me at 973-703-5500. If I don't pick up, leave a message with your name and phone number. So I'm going to leave that up there for a couple of seconds to allow you to write that down. I can even make it just a little bit larger. This is called technology, right? There we go. I can't make it that much larger. So let me go. Yeah, I can actually. There we go. There we go. So it's 973-703-5500. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll see you again real soon. Stay safe out there. I do miss you all, and I look forward to being back in the facility, back in your community soon, so we can do this live, and I could hear your work. But again, don't hesitate to call me. That's what I'm here for. Thank you very much. See you again soon.